Hey everybody, welcome back to Library Says. My name is Jamie, and today I'm wrapping up all the books that I read in November. So some of my most anticipated reads of 2020 came out this month, and I read them, and it was a wild ride. I read 11 books total this month, and some were amazing, and some were the opposite of amazing. So let's do it. I ended my October reading month with The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, which absolutely wrecked me. So starting my reading in November, I wanted to swing in a completely different direction, because if I had tried to read anything comparable at all, as far as genre or themes, I knew I was going to hate it, just by virtue of comparison. So I read true crime, sort of. It's The Cold Vanish by John Billman. It's compared to Jon Krakauer, stuff like that. John Billman is investigating the thousands of people who have gone missing in the United States in national parks over the course of the country's history. Just an astronomical number that shocked me. I thought we would get this sort of overview of missing people, some of the standout cases, what the investigations looked like, those who were found, those who weren't found, and just sort of more of an overview. And that's not really what this is. We get that some, but I'd say like 75% of this book is John Billman inserting himself into an ongoing investigation of a missing, I think he was 20-year-old boy, Jacob Gray, who went missing in the Pacific Northwest in a state park, and his father is desperate to find him. John Billman befriends the father, and then the book mostly follows him following Jacob's father trying to find his son. It felt a little weird. I will say it was interesting because it's something that I didn't know a whole lot about, and some of these facts and these numbers that were getting thrown at us were really mind-blowing. But John Billman kept bringing in psychics and tarot readings, and him and Jacob's father going to speak to a woman who claims she feeds Sasquatches and claims that they communicate with her telepathically, and they have Jacob and he's alive and unharmed, but he's their prisoner. And stuff like that, that just like, if you mentioned it here and there, that would be one thing, but it was so prevalent in his storytelling of this case that it made the whole thing almost feel like he was making fun of it, which I didn't love. I also, after reading this, was sort of on the fence, like, is it 4 stars because it's an interesting topic I knew nothing about, or is it 3 stars because I'm just not sure, like, it didn't quite sit right with me how it all goes down. And then I got online and was seeing that people on the internet, anonymous people, claiming to be close friends and family of Jacob Gray, on the internet, they're on Goodreads, they're on Amazon, leaving reviews of this book saying that John Billman did not get their permission to be included in the book or be named in the book. They disagree with his characterization of Jacob, and they're just like super not down with this book. Now, they are anonymous. None of this is proven. I have no idea who these people actually are that are making these claims, so it's all alleged. It could go either way. I did some digging and I wasn't able to find any trustworthy sources naming these people or giving credibility to these claims, but it was enough and it kept popping up enough that I just decided we're gonna go with 3 stars for this one, and that's Cold Vanish by John Billman. 3 stars. It's sort of a weird way to start my reading month in November. Then I read a thriller, They Never Learn by Lane Fargo. So this is sort of like a feminist serial killer thriller. You are following 2 women. One is a professor at a university who, in her spare time, is also a serial killer. She essentially takes out the trash. She murders men who have committed crimes against women, abuse, assault and rape, whatever, and then got away with it. And so justice wasn't served, so she serves it for them. It's fantastic. It was such an interesting idea. The other perspective we're getting is a freshman student at the same university. She's finally free of her emotionally abusive father, but she's crippled with anxiety and self-doubt because of her years living in the house with him. So she gets to university, and basically her first friend is her roommate, who is almost assaulted at a party. When they take it to school officials, nothing's really done. And we see these 2 parallel storylines of the teacher and the student, how their paths are going to eventually cross. I will say there was a twist later in this book. I was literally gobsmacked, just like dropped the book, mouth agape, like, holy cow, didn't see that coming. I thought it was so well done. I did think things wrapped up a little easily at the end, but if you're a thriller reader, and even if you're not, I would say this is a really fun, easy gateway thriller to just kind of jump in and enjoy the ride. And I gave this one 4 stars. Then I read a YA standalone fantasy, very reminiscent of like Gail Carson Levine, like sort of a classic, lovely fantasy, called The Will and the Wilds by Charlie N. Holmberg. I loved it. It was such a simple, direct story. There's not a whole lot of world building. It's very insulated, and you are focused on Enna, who lives in a cottage on the edge of a magical forest with her father, who has dementia after going to a demon realm and coming back with a treasure that he's given Enna that's supposed to protect her from evil, from fey, demon-like creatures that inhabit the woods where they live. Enna is sort of an oddball in town because of her father, and she's very interested in these magical creatures, which everyone else thinks like, oh, must be a witch. So she's avoided, she doesn't have a lot of friends, she's very lonely. One day she goes into the woods and she gets herself in trouble, and it throws her in the way of a human-like fey creature who has horns and hooves named Michaelis. They end up, I don't want to spoil anything, but they end up magically tied to each other and have to essentially like go through a quest and solve a puzzle to be able to be separated from each other, and in the meantime they get to know each other. The story is very simple. It just follows them, and it just follows what's happening between them and their mission that they are now on, and I loved it. Don't go into this one thinking it's going to be some epic fantasy with scope. It's not. It's a quiet, lovely, beautiful story, and I gave it 4 stars. Then I read Blood and Honey by Shelby Mahurin. This is the sequel to Serpent and Dove, which I gave 4 stars last year, and I was excited to give this one a go. I enjoyed it. I will say it drops you exactly in the middle of the story where the first book left off. It does not spend any time brushing you up on what was going on, reminding you of anything, who the characters are, what happened at the end of the first book, nothing. So if you don't remember or don't feel like you will enjoy this book without that, I would highly recommend a reread of the first book. I did not reread it, but I felt like I remembered things well enough, and I thought, I do stand by that. I think my reading experience was fine without having reread the first book. I love Read and Lou's relationship. Just love it. It was easily the star element of the whole book. Now, I'm sitting here trying to remember the actual plot of this book about a month after having read it, and I am drawing a blank. So that's not great. Like, I'm remembering specific scenes from the book, but the actual plot, kind of at a loss. So that's not great. I will say when I finished this book, I gave it 4 stars. I don't really want to spoil anything if you haven't read the first one, because the second one is directly following the first book, like I said. But if you liked the first one, I would recommend you give the second one a go. Like I said, 4 stars. Then I read one of my most anticipated reads of the year, which was Sky Hunter by Marie Lu. The cover is stunning. That is the reason I wanted to read this book. And it is the best part of this book. So I was pretty disappointed with this. I just found it sort of generic. I didn't find any part of it to be that mind-blowing. It's a futuristic, almost dystopian-esque sci-fi novel that I thought was space opera. Like, I thought it was a different planet or multiple planets. It's not. It takes place in a future version of our world where our people are the old ones or the ancient ones, something like that. And we have died off, leaving nothing but ruins. And the characters of the book, they don't know what caused our demise, the end of our civilization as we know it. And they're not sure if they're a different group of people or if they are the ancestors of the few survivors of our civilization. So that was interesting, very interesting. I was on board. As soon as I realized that, I was like, oh, this is cool, I'm here. But you are following a girl who is a soldier in a group of soldiers who are just teenagers fighting for a country that is basically the last stronghold that hasn't been taken over by an otherwise like all-consuming empire of the rest of the world. A soldier with wings is captured from the enemy empire's army, and she is partnered with him. That's the best I can do explaining this. Everything is super convenient. Everything works out in a way that just wasn't that believable. And I just didn't find any element of this particularly unique or thought-provoking. Honestly, this book feels to me like 2010 dystopian. Like, I would have not been surprised to find this published when Divergent, Hunger Games, Matched, like those were coming out. Which I guess was when Legend came out, and Marie Lu's writing style hasn't changed or evolved. And I know a lot of people love her, but I never have. I never loved Legend. I never even finished that series, and I haven't read anything else she's written. So maybe it's just a matter of me not clicking with Marie Lu's writing. That could be the case too. But I gave this one 3 stars. Then I read This Light Between Us by Andrew Fukuda. This is historical fiction that follows a Japanese-American boy right before World War II who starts up a pen pal relationship with a girl in France. And then over the course of years, they continue to be friends and get closer and closer via their letters. And then right before World War II, Pearl Harbor happens, and he and his family are put in a Japanese internment camp in California, I believe. His French friend, Charlie is her name, is Jewish, and after a while her letters stop coming after France is occupied by the Nazis. And you were following them over years as he's in this internment camp, and then he goes to war in World War II and tries to find her. I will say the idea of this I was just obsessed with, and the first quarter or third of the book I loved, but then it became just a World War II book in a way I didn't anticipate. This book was marketed so that I believed it was going to bounce back and forth between both of our characters' perspectives and really be centrally focused on this relationship they were having via letters. And that ends pretty quickly on in the book, and it is focused almost entirely on our male main character and our French character, Charlie. She's basically not in the book after the halfway mark. And I didn't anticipate that, and I was let down. I just thought it wasn't what I wanted, and I was sad that it wasn't what I expected. Also, there's this sort of magical element that's dropped in towards the end that solves some things for us. And otherwise, this book is completely rooted in history, rooted in reality. And I just thought, this is bizarre, and I wish it didn't exist. I wish we had not done this. So for those reasons, I gave this one 3 stars. Then I read a sort of dark-ish romance. My first L.J. Shen novel, Playing with Fire, which I think is her most recent novel that came out. And a lot of L.J. Shen fans didn't love it, but I haven't read anything by her, so I went in just hoping for the best, and I didn't love it. So this is about a girl who survived a fire in high school, but it scarred her face terribly. And now she's in college and is bullied terribly and is very lonely and lives with her grandmother. And she meets a boy who is an underground fighter. Like, there's a fight ring, an underground fight ring at their college, and they end up being friends. And he has internal scars that match her external scars. Not an original element in this book to be found. I would say this book is November 9 by Colleen Hoover meets Beautiful Disaster by Jamie Maguire. That's basically the whole setup of this. It's very long. It's very long. It did not need to be so long. I found myself skimming towards the end. Everything was super predictable. He was a changed man for no reason. I don't know. I was just like, about this, and I gave it 2 stars. Then I read another much anticipated book from 2020, which is Chasing Lucky by Jen Bennett. I love Jen Bennett. My favorites of hers are Alex Approximately and Starry Eyes, and this one sounded good. It's about a girl who, she and her mother have moved around all over New England her whole life. She's never really had a home. When her grandmother goes on a Peace Corps mission, she asks her daughter, our main character's mother, to come manage the family bookstore in the town where she grew up, a place they've been running from, basically our main character's whole life, the main character's name being Josie. So they do that. They get back to this town. There are all sorts of secrets Josie doesn't know about her mother and why she ran in the first place, why she has this contentious relationship with her family, her extended family, her relatives, and when they first left this small town, when Josie was a kid, she left behind a best friend, a boy named Lucky. Now she is thrown back into his path. Their relationship starts up again, but he's very different than she remembers, and that's it. Okay, so that's the setup. I thought this was very whatever. I didn't love the main characters. I never really felt like they had a real connection. I thought the plots were just not that well developed. I never cared that much, which I know Jen Bennett can do because in some of her other books I have cared so much. So that makes this even more disappointing, that I just kind of found it to be whatever, and when I was done I was like, okay, and the next book, which is sad. I know a lot of people are really loving this one, so I wouldn't try and dissuade you from giving it a go, but for me it was just 3 stars. Then I read one of my favorite books of the month, which is an e-arc that doesn't come out until next year, but it is a debut romance novel called The Layover by Lacey Walden. Lacey Walden is a flight attendant in real life, and her character in this book is also a flight attendant who has just gotten engaged, and her fiance has asked her to give up her job as a flight attendant so that they can be settled and she can be a perfect wife and mother. And so she is about to go on her last job as a flight attendant. She gets on the plane and realizes that she's with a man, another flight attendant, who she does not like. She loathes him for reasons that at the beginning we're not sure about. And it's going to spoil her last job as a flight attendant. And they're supposed to have a single day layover in Belize, and then there's mechanical problems on the plane, and it pushes the layover to a weekend-long layover, and she has to interact with him the whole time, and they don't like each other. So it must go really badly, right? I loved this. I loved the flight attendant perspective on the whole thing, having not been a flight attendant myself. I really loved all the details and just sort of the minutia of being a flight attendant and what that looks like behind the scenes and how layovers work and all of that. Like, it's just so interesting. That element really beefed up the story for me. And then I just thought the romance was really killer, and I just loved it. I read it in, I think, maybe 2 sittings, and it was fluffy and warm and made me happy, and now I want to go to Belize. I gave this one 4 stars. All right, then I read, I think, my #1 most anticipated book of 2020, which was Ready Player 2 by Ernest Cline. Ready Player 1 is one of my favorite novels of all time. I have both read the book and listened to the audiobook numerous times. And I was so excited to the point that I pre-ordered the audiobook. My sister and I made a plan to have no plans the first weekend after the book was released, and we were going to do nothing but listen to this audiobook and live vlog it, which we did do. I don't want to get into it here. I'm just gonna say I was very disappointed, and I did not enjoy my time reading this, and I gave it 2 stars. If you're interested in the full spoiler experience, lots of spoilers, of my sister and me reading this book and not being happy about it, check that vlog up right there. And then I read my last book of November, which I enjoyed so much, and it is Take a Hint, Dani Brown. This follows Dani, the younger sister of Chloe Brown, whose book I read earlier this year and adored. I gave it 5 stars, as she's thrown into a fake dating relationship with a security guard on the campus where she works as an instructor. It's sort of like a friends to lovers thing, and Dani really likes physical relationships but is not interested in emotional entanglement. And then she and Zaf are thrown into this fake dating scenario, and she has to sort of reevaluate what she wants. And it is adorable. I will say this one wasn't quite as good to me as Chloe Brown is, because I found that there wasn't a lot of other plot besides just these 2 characters being coupley, which was adorable and I enjoyed it, but I did wish it had a little bit more meat to it. But regardless, I gave this one 4 stars, and if you want further thoughts about it, it was actually the first book I read for 'Tis the Season-a-thon, which I vlogged, and I will link that up above as well if you want to check it out. So that's it. Those are the 11 books I read in November. Some were great, some were not so great. It was kind of a hit or miss, all over the place sort of month. I would love to hear if you've read any of these books, what you think about them, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Bye!